Welcome back to another episode of The Ordinary Experience. Today I have with me Shivani Pau. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. You've got a lovely smile on your face.
I know. I feel like I'm trying to control it. This is the
How
first podcast I've been on, so it's very exciting for me.
I am honored. I am absolutely honored to have the host of the Millennial Mind on my podcast. I do like what you do. I think it's cool to be touching on so many interesting and quite deep conversations that you have.
Yeah.
I was doing a deep dive on you on Thursday, as I said, and
Okay.
I absorbed pretty much all of season 2 in the space of my drive to work. I had it on like times 2 speed, and
Really?
my
You don't think I
yeah,
speak too fast?
not at times 2 speed. I can deal with you at times 2 speed. Times 4 speed, that would be a little much.
All right.
You do a pretty good job. I like the way that you navigate the waters of those conversations because they're quite difficult conversations to have. And
Yeah.
it's those type of conversations that you'd expect to have at nighttime, but you do them during the day, and it's like getting mentally prepared for that. And obviously you absorb a lot of the energy that that person's talking about. The one
Right.
about baby loss, for instance,
Hmm.
that was a tough one to listen to.
Yeah, it is.
And yeah, let's dive into that. How do you podcast? Like, what's the thought process behind it?
Hmm. So I guess it's not. I think people always say to me like, "How do you think of these topics?" And I guess like my whole life, I've been talking about all these different topics. Right? There are a topic of conversation that comes into my household like every single day. And let's just say the baby loss one, for example. You know, my mum had two miscarriages, and I think I only found that out when I was like 16 or 17.
Really?
And I couldn't really talk to her about it. It was just like, yeah, I did. And it was like a normal thing. And it was like, okay. Um, it wasn't a big deal for her to talk about it in the sense that I don't think she felt comfortable in kind
Mm.
of exploring, how it affected her and what it meant to her. And I didn't really hear that from her. And then a couple of years later, I found out that my grandma had experienced baby loss. So she actually lost a baby. She gave birth to a still baby. And my dad told me about it. And he was like, yeah, we named him, we had a name for him. And it was literally only maybe 3 months ago that I spoke to her about it. So it was
Wow.
a long gap in between my dad telling me the story of what happened and me speaking to my grandma and having the guts to be like, did you lose a baby? Um, and what was interesting to me is when I spoke to her about it and I gave her that time to listen and to really engage in that conversation, she wanted to talk about it. She was telling me, this is what happened. This is how, it wasn't even that, almost that this is who told me it happened. She was completely unaware. She was under drugs. She didn't know she lost the baby, but it's so different back in those days. She'd be like, my granddad would drop her off at the hospital. She would give birth to the baby. He would go to work and he would come pick her up. So now there's
Right.
this holding of your husband coming with you and everyone being like, oh my God, I can't believe you're in code and my husband can't be with me. So my grandma gave birth to all her children by herself. It was just like a normal thing. Like, you go, have your
What the
baby.
hell?
I'm going to go to work and I'll pick you up after it's done. Like, no, nothing what it's like today, right? And
Can I
so
ask, how does that make you feel?
I was just shocked. I was just like, what on earth? Like, how on earth could he do that? And she was like, look, Shivani, it was like that in those days. It wasn't, you couldn't afford to take a whole day out of work every time you had a baby, even though it was like 3 or 4 times in a lifetime. It wasn't something that you did.
Mm.
And so all of these concepts are very interesting to me. And, the complete lack of understanding of how a woman feels when she goes through something like that, the lack of empathy, um, the lack of care, I guess, is how I look at it now. She didn't feel that at the time. But when you look at it now and you think you've had a baby loss and then you just have to get on with your life, like nothing has happened. You just think, how can that be, right? How could you have gone through that and survived through that and then still be this incredible strong woman? My grandma is so strong. She's like the strongest woman I know. And strong in a different way to my mum. My mum's very
Mm-hmm.
like mentally strong. My grandma's like, she walks in a room and you'll feel her presence. She's like one of those women. Um, And so it was really hard to have that conversation with her, because I just thought like, wow, you're being so vulnerable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was really interesting to see how things have dramatically changed. And so that was something that I really wanted to talk about. And Lila, who's one of my really close friends, she went through that, and I witnessed her go through that. And I just remember when I went to her house and we were talking about it, she was just like, it feels like nobody really understands it. And she actually was quite young. And so all of us were in a completely different stage of our life. So
Mm-hmm.
for her, I think it must have been really isolating as well. And that's why I wanted to get her on the podcast to really share her story, because she's doing great things now with her website too. So I just wanted to almost elevate her voice.
It's quite incredible, the fact that you're able to absorb those conversations, and it, like, does it take a mental toll on you, or are you able to compartmentalize those conversations? Like, obviously understand, like, empathize, try and empathize with what the person's saying, but put it in a box so that you don't have to not deal with it, but like it doesn't affect your day to day. Because
No,
talking about baby loss and having that conversation is a difficult conversation to have,
it's a very
especially when you're as vulnerable as you get on the podcast.
It is. It definitely is. So I guess in two parts, yeah, I guess I can compartmentalize. But I think something that I make sure I don't do is compartmentalize too much. Because when Lila was telling me about her baby loss, and then my grandma was
Mm.
telling me about it, and then somebody else in my family has gone through it, tapping into those emotions and syncing those together is really key for me. Because if you compartmentalize something, how I look at it as I just completely block it out, right? I'm unable to revisit that emotion I was feeling at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But having these conversations and kind of going deep into them, you're able to almost really absorb what that person is telling you, and then almost apply that same thing to somebody else. Because I think one thing people feel is that anytime you're going through something difficult, it's like, I'm going through it myself and nobody has been through it, right? You feel very alone, you feel very isolated. So being able to tap into that experience and share it with somebody else will perhaps help them into kind of feeling not so isolated and not so alone.
I understand that. It's actually a pretty cool way of helping you have better conversations with people, because you're tapping into all of those different parts of your life, and
Yes,
you're going and getting those emotions when you're talking to the respective individuals. I like that. I'm gonna
exactly.
use that. I use it to some extent. I I put everything in a little black box when it comes to people giving me criticism, people giving me praise. I put it in a little black box, and if I don't need it at that moment in time, I go and put it in what is an archive. And
Right.
when I need that particular opinion and the emotions that come with it, I go and get that, bring it out and open it up to see, like, okay, so their opinion is potentially valid at this moment in time.
Yeah.
Their emotions that I will feel could be valid. Let's explore what's going on.
Right.
And so, yeah, I do it to some extent, but I like your way. Don't completely compartmentalize it, but just dip your toe in.
Exactly.
I like that. Where did the Millennial Mind come from? It's a cool name. It rolls off the tongue.
Oh my gosh, where did the millennial mind come from? Okay, so I somehow think of a lot of ideas when I'm exercising. It
Okay.
just, I don't know why. I just always, when I'm working out or I'm walking or I'm running, I will think of an idea. And the concept of my podcast kind of came from, I was really inspired by my auntie, Rashma Sajani. And I went to New York and she was like, just come to my work for a day. And I was like, okay. And I just like love this woman. If you don't know who she is, Google her. She's amazing.
I'm gonna have to.
Yeah, I've done a podcast with her. You should
I
listen to
haven't
it.
listened to I haven't listened to that one.
Podcast with her. Tripped you out there.
I
But
said I listened to season 2, not season 1.
she's in season 2,
Okay.
episode, maybe episode 1.
Okay.
Don't know, can't remember. Yeah, so I almost met her very coincidentally, with Indian family, especially with mine. I have like 3,000 trillion cousins. And so, whenever my mom's like, oh, you have this auntie, I'm almost like, okay, yeah, who is it now? But she was like, trust me, you're going to like this one. I was like, all right. So when I met her, we met in London, we went for lunch. And then she, on the same day, was like, come to my book launch. I'm launching a book tonight. And I was in this phase of like, on this journey of self-improvement, self-discovery, really tapping into like all of this personal development stuff. It really came up coincidentally. I was in like a bad relationship and I was feeling really low, and I was almost like all these things started coming together at the same time. And so when I met her, I was in a kind of curious mindset of, oh, I really want to learn from you, right? And so I went to her book launch, and then when I went to New York, she was like, come in, like come shadow me for a day. And I was like, okay. So I went to go shadow her, and she was recording a podcast. Now, all I remember is I didn't know what the hell a podcast was, right? I was just like I kind of know what it is, don't really know what it is, don't understand the whole concept of it. But what was really interesting is the way she did podcasting was completely different to the way I would do podcasting, right?
Okay.
So she is like a New York bestselling author. She is like being spoken on TED. She is like big time, right? So when she's recording a podcast, she's got a room with no walls, right? No windows in the walls, so it's like completely blocked out, and she has all this equipment, and then she has somebody who's like sitting next to her, like a director almost, or like a co-host, and with that co-host, she's telling her, okay, Rashma, we need to do that again, let's repeat. So they were like repeating sentences over and over again because her podcast is great, right? And she was doing like different things. So she was like, hey guys, today I'm going to be doing something. So her podcast is called Brave Not Perfect. That's what her book is. It's her brand name. And she would be doing things like challenges in this podcast that were brave and not perfect. So one of them would be like singing karaoke or doing a cartwheel. So for me, I was almost like, oh my gosh, you have this amazing concept called Brave Not Perfect. And then you can just relate so many different things to it. So I need to think of an amazing concept that you can relate everything to. And she was like, no, you don't. And she was like, what are you passionate about? And I was like, well, you know what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about women speaking up for themselves in an Indian household. And I think there's loads of things within our community and our culture that I absolutely love. And I'm so proud to be Indian, but there's a lot of things that I think are very backwards and that we need to change the tradition on them, right? And so I was explaining this to her, and she was like, well, you know, I think you're a great speaker, you should just do it. And I was like, okay. And I was in this like inspired mood, okay, in New York. It was me, like it was sunny. I was like going to this amazing office in New York. I just finished watching her record a podcast. I was on holiday with my family, and all I could think about was like, I want to be like Rashma. I want to be like this public speaker who speaks about all of these issues. Anyway, we went for dinner with her that night, and I was telling my brother, and he was like, you should do it. And, you know, I really think in life, it just takes one person to believe in you, and one person to push you, and one person to transform your life, right? It literally just takes one person to notice you, for you to think, I can do something. But the beautiful thing about life is like, you can be that person. You don't have to wait for somebody else to come in and be that person for you. You can be that person for you. But for me, Rashman was definitely that person for me. And even my brother, when, you know, we were walking and he was like, you should do it. I think you should do it. It'd be great. And I was like, wow, okay, there's two people now that are telling me this would be great, right? And so I came home, and I was writing on a little notepad. I'm not joking. It was like a Post-it note like this.
Please tell me you still got the notepad, yeah?
I don't. I really need to look for it. But I had this little Post-it note. I was writing about all these ideas I wanted to talk about. And I was like, right, I'm going to do it. So I come home, and it's like, I get a job, because I basically had quit my job previously, and I went traveling for like 3 months. So I came home from New York, I got a job straight away. And I started in September, and I was like, okay, I'm going to start this podcast. So my initial idea was the Indian problem. And I wanted to talk about all the problems that we have, controversial, right? I wanted to talk about all the problems that we have, and I wanted to solve them. And it was like, I was like so certain this was going to be it. So I basically...
So you were sort of like taking her idea and putting your own spin on it.
No, because I was basically just doing a podcast because I said I wanted to do something that inspired other people. But I thought that I needed to have a concept, like hers is Brave Not Perfect. I thought I needed to have a concept you can apply to everything. But the Indian problem was just the Indian problem, right? It wasn't as broad and probably encompassing of all different things. So yeah, I thought of the Indian problem, and I contacted Mira Manik. Do you know who she is? She was my friend.
I don't know who that is.
So I thought, okay, she has written this book. She knows somebody I know. I'm going to contact him. So I contacted him and I was like, I have this idea for a podcast. I wanted to do it because I really want to talk about blah, 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 blah. And he was like, cool, I'll put you in touch. So I called her and I was so nervous. I remember I was in Waitrose by my work and she called me and I was like, oh my God, she's like such an amazing writer. And I told her my idea and she was like, Shivani, that sounds amazing. And I was like, what? Like, okay. So I was like, and I wanted to be really clear, and I didn't want to do a podcast with my friends. You know, a lot of people do a podcast with their friends and their family, and I wanted to make sure I did it with people. I wanted to make sure that I did it with people who I knew they knew what they were talking about. And a lot of the time, I think when you speak to family or friends, you're blurred by your opinion of them in terms of what they are talking about. Does that make sense? So
it does, because I've actually done a podcast with both my parents and my brother.
Right.
So I understand what you're saying. And being in the position to do that, you sort of have to take yourself out of the body, and depending on how you want the podcast to go, like mine's super conversational, right? We're not an interview style. So I can still be brother Viraj, I can still be son Viraj. But for what you do, I can see why that might be a problem.
So mine was more interview based, and I wanted to have it very, like, what can you take away from it? Like, what, and I also wanted to, you know, for me, it was about lifting up a lot of brown voices that I think weren't being lifted. And, you know, something that I always think about is it's not about how many followers you have or how big you are. It's like your purpose has to align with mine. And that's happened a few times to me where I've recorded a podcast, I haven't released it. They've got like 100K plus followers, but their purpose didn't align with mine, so I didn't release it. I'm okay with that. So I reached out to Mira Manic, and she was like, yeah, cool, I'm on board. And then another thing I wanted to talk about was modeling, because I was modeling at the time and everyone thought it was like the most amazing thing I was doing, and it was like, well, I'm deeply unhappy. I don't really enjoy it that much, so why am I doing it, right? And I wanted to, again, with my podcast at this time, I always felt like I didn't have the confidence to say a lot of these things. And so bringing on somebody who'd had years of experience, like Candice, who I had as a podcast guest, gave me that validation to be like, I can talk about this now, right?
So in a way, it was sort of your own therapy.
I guess so, a little bit. A lot of the things that I was talking about were so close to my heart. And so a lot of it was stuff that I couldn't wait to speak about, right? I was just like, yes, this is the platform I can do it in. And so I brought Candice on, and it's so funny because this is the funniest thing. I literally went to meet Mira, went to meet Candice, and I had one mic, and I put the mic in between us. And I just want to say, you know, with content, you think you can create it just like you see on TV with like a click of a switch, right? Yeah. Like I had no idea on how to do this, no idea about positioning, no idea about angles, no idea about sound. So here's me turning up to Mira's house, and she was so sweet, bless her, honestly. I had one mic. And then what I did is I borrowed my friend's SLR camera, like just a basic SLR camera, like a Canon, and I basically put it on top. I don't even think I had a tripod at this time, or maybe I did, and I was trying to work with tripod. I couldn't bloody do it. I'm really bad with this stuff. And I just put it there, like just straight. And so there's me thinking I'm gonna have like a Tom Bilyeu impact theory, almost visual, that people are gonna watch, right? Like this is exactly what I thought. It was gonna be like both of our faces. I was gonna be here, she was gonna be here, and the camera was almost gonna follow my eyes. I had no idea how these things would work. And so I literally put the camera there, and I have these videos. I should release them one day as to how ridiculous they were. They were there, and then we just recorded. And then after like 4 minutes, it stopped because there was not enough memory on the memory card. Obviously, I didn't know that. And then anyway, the podcast went really well. We recorded it. It was excellent. And I just sat on it. And I was like, I also didn't at this point know that you could edit podcasts. I had no idea. I thought you just release them. I had no idea you have to put a sound before. I had no idea you can edit the ums, the ahs, I didn't know that. And so I was just like, oh, the podcast is done. Wonderful. So again, prodded along to Candice's house on a Friday night. Again, this was even worse. We were sitting here and I put the camera on the side. So literally you can see us from such a far away distance and just us talking. My back is faced to the camera. I just had no idea how to do this stuff, right? So I recorded those 2 podcasts, and then I just sat on it. And then I was like, when am I going to release this? And then lockdown happened. And I almost was just like, I should just do it. I should just release my podcast. Like, what's the worst that can happen? And so I thought, and then I just released it. But sorry, back to your original question, what you asked me, where did the millennial mind come from? It was first called the Indian problem. And then I was like, that's a bit problematic and also just rude. Sounds like I'm, a Nazi. So I was like, I'm not going to do I need to think of a better name that's more inclusive. And then
So
I was like,
it was almost like a business decision in a way. It was like, I want
yeah,
to cater for as many people as possible so that I can
yeah,
project as many voices as I possibly can.
exactly. And I think also people were saying the Indian problem is quite negative. The word, the Indian problem, implies that there's a problem. It doesn't imply that you want to solve it. So then I was like, exactly what you said. I want to include it. I want to include more people in this. And there's so many topics in the first season I wanted to talk about that I was like, they're not actually related to that. So I was like, let me do a very broad thing. And I was like, what do I want to talk about? And I was like, I want to talk about millennials. And then I thought about millennial mindset. I don't know where that came from. And then I was like, one day I was running and I was like, millennial mind. I was like, what?
Was it one of those moments where you like in a movie where everything just stops and everything just makes sense in that moment and you're like, yes, this is it. I see it. I see the vision.
No, it wasn't that. It was like I was running and I was like, shit, I need to remember this. Like, remember. Because when I'm running, I think of all these amazing ideas. And I'm like, what was that when I got home? Like, what was I talking about? And I was like, millennial mind. And I told my friends, like, what do you think of millennial mind? They were like, yeah, cool. And then there we go. That's how millennial mind was born.
Yeah, it's a cool name. It rolls off the tongue really nicely.
But most people don't know how to spell it, which is the problem. People will always tag it. And I'm just like, come on, guys, 2 L's, 2 N's. Is it? Yeah.
I've got no idea. I know I get it half right, and then when I listen to it in Spotify, it picks up the rest.
Exactly. You just have to type in my name, and not that that's any.
Shivani's not a hard one to spell.
How is though?
Yeah, you could go for POW. POW. Yeah, I get it.
POO. People always confuse it. Joking.
Really, POO.
I'm joking.
Okay, so millennial mind came from that. Was it I'd love to talk about your auntie for a moment, because sometimes it's very difficult to look up to someone that is family, that isn't your parents, right? And you said that I want to be her, I want to be like her. Looking back on that, like, is that a little bit, would you how am I going to phrase this? Like, was it weird, the fact that she was your auntie and you were looking up to her? It was just normal to you?
Yeah, I feel like I've always been somebody, even when I'm at work, and if I see a powerful woman or a powerful man, the first thing that comes into my head, and this may be bizarre, is like, oh my God, that's somebody's parent. Like, wow, that is somebody's parent.
That's the first thing that comes into your mind.
I always used to think that. And I was like, that is amazing that is somebody's parent, and that's somebody's wife, and that's somebody's husband, right? And so when I saw Rashma, the first thing I thought was like, she's an Indian mom and she's doing this. Like, this is amazing. This is like revolutionary, because a lot of women who are Indian and are like from my parents' generation, they weren't educated. Rashma's not my mom's generation. She's much younger. Right. I think 10 years younger. So she's kind of in between us. But the point is that she's still older than me, and she couldn't be my mom unless she had me like, I don't know, 20 maybe. But she's almost somebody that I feel like, wow, you are just a superwoman. And I feel like I'm super inspired by women like that. And so it wasn't weird to me. It was just like, wow, I'm seeing an Indian woman who is talking about being brave, talking about standing up, talking about not conforming to social ideologies.
Yeah, I get you.
It was really amazing to see that. And so when I did see it, I almost like clung on to her and was like, wow, I need to be like this woman.
Do you still like text her, contact her, like ask her for advice, stuff like that?
I do. When I finished my first season of the podcast, I was like, I want to talk to you. And she was like, okay, what's up? And I was like, I want to do season 2. And this is so funny, because even though she has supported me the entire time with the podcast, I'm always a little bit scared to ask her to be on it again. I was almost like, will you be on it again? Like, will you do it? And so I remember I was like, I want to do video. And she was like, Shivani, people are dying for content right now in lockdown. You need to do video. And this is in the summer. And I was like, I want to do video. I'm just a little bit nervous. And she was like, why? And I was like, I don't know. And this is also really funny. When I did season 2, I was like, I want to have a studio, like Impact Theory. This is like, I was like, screw it. I couldn't do the visual myself. I'm going to hire a studio, and I'm going to do like a studio. I'm going to have 3 cameras. I'm going to have a person coming in, and we're going to do a podcast. It's going to be amazing. And I can do 3 podcasts a day. Like, all of these things are so funny when I think about it now, because I'm like, number one, why did I think I could get a studio? I actually emailed loads of people about studios. Obviously lockdown happened, and thank God. And I remember speaking to one of my friends, Akash, who I did a podcast with, and he was like, Shivani, just do it over Zoom. Like, why are you going to incur this like 20 grand cost for like your whole season 2 podcast? I'm going to do 2. I don't want to do like 20 episodes. I was like, I've got 20 episodes. I want to hire a studio. I want it to have like 3 different cameras. Somebody needs to be doing those cameras. I need somebody to edit the podcast because I don't know how to do video. Honestly, it was just like all of these things were so funny because you just think you can do it all and you just can't. And through that, I called Rashma and she was like, do a video. And she was like, do it on Zoom, like a normal person. And Akash was like, do it on Zoom. And I was like, all right, fine, I'll do it on Zoom. And so, yeah, I do.
I took a different route.
Right.
I'm in a very privileged position to have parents that support me. And since coming on, for a bit of context, since coming onto Clubhouse, like the word South Asian, I've never ever come across.
Same.
Up until about 2 months ago. I now realize it's a politically correct word for brown people.
Right.
And it's like banding us all together and in a way putting us in a box. I'm not a fan of that, but it's what it is. And so one of the things I realized is that, there's a lot of people out there that don't have parents that support them the way my parents do. So when it came to me starting YouTube and me kind of growing or wanting to grow the podcast further, the room that I'm sitting in now used to be our like home study. And my dad was like, well, I'll give you a blank canvas and do what you want with it. So like when things start opening up again that way, I actually have a podcasting area.
Amazing.
So we went instead of going out and renting places, we went and built it in-house. And that was the idea, that you can do YouTube here and then you could sit over there, turn the camera around, have a 1 camera set up and be able to do the podcast over there. Sure as hell, lockdown came into effect and that blew everything out of the water. But, the backdrop looks nice.
It looks amazing. It looks really good.
So it's really been handy to have that, and kind of like a space that is solely mine, which I've never had before, that I can create in, I've never liked plants before. I realized I absolutely love them now. If I could put more plants in here, I would.
I've seen you going to the garden center.
We got some fake ones in the back over there, but they look real from afar.
They look real.
I like it. You went full out for your podcast second season. Like I know you use a software called Riverside, and I saw the cost of that thing, and I was like, damn. But it makes a lot of sense because of the way that you do your podcast, why you'd want that. But to change gears slightly, we can go down 2 avenues. You mentioned that you found a job when you came back from New York. And before we jump onto that, I'd like to talk to you about, you mentioned Indian family and the Indian problem. And yeah, as a culture, Indians do have problems. It's, it's part and parcel of our heritage and our culture. We've been around a while. And so some of that stuff sticks. And you got to remember that generationally, our parents, our grandparents have come from different countries. Mine come from East Africa. So they are different from, a generation that comes directly from India to the UK. And then you've got the ones that, go to America and they're slightly different. And so you've got completely different cultures within the Indian culture. But one of the things I wanted to explore with you and talk to you about is, and it's been interesting to me to listen to you about it.
Right.
When you've talked about, you and your family and being an Indian woman, it comes across, and I've said this to you before, so it's not going to come across as harsh now, but it comes across as fucking brutal.
Right.
It comes across as like super brutal. And I've always wondered, like, why not take the approach as kill them with kindness, or or a different way, but I want
Okay.
you to tell it from your point of view and not me to put words in your mouth. And
Right.
so yeah, let's do that, because I find it completely intriguing. Obviously, I'm a man. I cannot be in the position that you're in,
Uh-huh.
because in Indian culture, it just doesn't work that way. Like my parents, it doesn't operate like that. Like my family doesn't
Yeah.
operate like that. But obviously in yours, it's slightly different. And if you're willing to go down that path with me, I'd love to hear about it.
I'm interested when you say you think I'm brutal. So give me an example. Instead, because you said, don't you think it'd be better to go kill it with kindness? I think I do.
It
I do that.
it comes across as brutal. Now, it might be because I haven't ever met you in person, and so I'm trying to hear different tones in your voice.
Right.
And obviously, you're quite a straightforward person,
I am. Yeah.
so it's like you get straight to the jump.
Right.
Like there's no fluffness around it. It's like, this is what I mean. Like you
Right.
don't put an impact. Well, sure, there's an impact built into what you're saying, but there's no kind of like extra impact. So to give you an example, we were on a clubhouse together, and I think you mentioned something about doing the dishes or not doing the dishes, and you were asking your mum, and you had asked your mum or
Right.
your dad, like, why can't my brother do it? And
Right.
it was like I felt this aggression in your voice that was like, why can't he do it? Like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have I have my own work to do. I host a podcast. Like at the end of the day, that's my business. I
Right.
I am At some point I could make money off this. This could become a side income or a full-time income.
Right.
Why can you not let my brother do the dishes? And I
Right.
don't know how old you are, but in my house I'm 23, my brother's 20, but we don't do the dishes, but we share the cleaning.
Yes.
Um,
Wait, you
so
don't do dishes? Did you
I
say?
do the dishes. I do
Okay.
the dishes. I do. Hold on. Don't. My my mom has very, very, very high standards. So we're always trying to beat that standard. And yes, in some cases it's an unachievable standard,
Mm-hmm.
and this is talking about me, um, sometimes we don't meet it, but we do our best too. So we share the load in our household. Doesn't all, people don't always pull their weight. Things come up, blah 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 blah. That's part and parcel of life. But with you, it was like I heard this aggression in your voice, and I was like,
Definitely.
"Ooh, that's interesting. Can you touch on that? Can you tell me
I
why?
can.
Like, why this way?"
Yeah. So, I have grown up as the only girl in the house. I grew up with three boys. And there was
Sorry,
all,
three boys.
yeah. So I lived with my cousins growing up. Um, and there was always a different expectation put on me than there was for them. Um, and what frustrates me, and you can hear it in my voice because I'm very passionate about it, is
Yes.
that there is a different expectation put in terms, wait, there's a different expectation put on me in terms of the cooking and the cleaning, but there isn't in terms of education. So you want me to be a high flying businesswoman, the same as my cousins and the same as my brother, but you want me to then come home and clean and cook and do all the housework. And you think that's my duty. And I just think that's so wrong.
Can
There
I
is,
pause you there? Because, like in our house, like that's just a given. Like I am domesticated. Like we domesticated. Like I can cook, I can clean, I can maintain a four-bedroom household by myself. I can
right,
go to work and I can do all my podcasting and all my other businesses by myself. I can maintain that. And I
right.
find it really interesting because obviously that doesn't happen everywhere else in the world, in every other family.
No. And it's not just in my family. And this is the thing, we have come from, my family are quite traditional. And I don't blame them for the way that they think, because that's exactly what they were taught. The women were taught to focus on the household chores, then education second. And then the men were told to focus on their education and going out and working, and then never think about the household chores, looking after the children, playing their part in that. It just wasn't a focus for them because they were focusing so much about working and making money. And that's fine. But in this day and age, when you are educating your daughter, when you are asking them to achieve certain things with their exams, when you expect them to go to university and come out of it with a career, why do you then not expect the boy to learn basic household things, right? Like it's just a basic household chore or, you know, basic life skill that they should know. Now, you know, it's very easy for me to observe that, because from my perspective, of course, I'm going to think it's unfair. That's where it rooted from. Like, this is so unfair. Why do I have to learn how to do this and this and this? My brother doesn't have to learn how to do that. And as a girl, you know, a lot of the comments were said to me were like, you need to be trained. When you get married, when your in-laws, you know, your in-laws may not like this. Your husband won't like it if you do this. But none of that was said to my brother. Like, your wife won't like it. You know, when you get married, Akshay, when you have in-laws and they can't see that you don't know how to make a cup of coffee, that conversation would never, ever happen in my house.
We're talking
And so,
about boiling a kettle and pouring water into
right,
it, right? Okay, we're
right.
not talking about French press.
We're not talking about French fries. We're not even talking about an espresso. We're just literally talking about granules. He does know how to do that, by the way. That was just
Okay,
something.
I realized.
But my point is that there was a different expectation put on women than there was to men. Now, I think the one thing that you touch on about being brutal is I say things how they are. I'm like, that's ridiculous. Like, do you think he's a child? Do you think he's an infant? And I will say things in that way. However, I think in order to influence somebody, you need to understand from their perspective where they're coming from. And what I mean by that is, I used to often get really annoyed at my brother and get really angry at him. And then I realized it wasn't his fault, because he has been completely unaware of how things work because he hasn't been showed them. You know, there's basic things like going to the supermarket. My brother will take a long time to go to the supermarket, but it's because he's never had to do it before that he won't know how to do it. So if we continue to almost not let him go to the supermarket because it takes him so long, then how will he ever learn? Right. And this is the thing. I feel like he would be willing to do that. It's just that we'll be like, no, don't worry about it because it's going to take you too long. But as a girl, since I've been 15, I've been like, you have to go to the supermarket, come with mum, learn how to do it. Because when you get married, like my whole life was like, when you get married, you'll need to learn how to do these things.
So hold on. So that narrative of sorry, not that narrative, but the idea that you are going to get married was
Yeah,
already in your head at 15.
earlier, for sure. Like when I was like, I don't know, young, like
They were
11, it was
so the conversation of
not
you
just at
need
home.
to
It's not just at home. It's from
okay.
everything. It's everything that you are exposed to, whether that's like, you know, social media, TV, movies, family friends, school, your social circles. You know, within an Indian culture, you are primed, I guess, from a young age to think about marriage because,
Did you have Indian friends?
yes,
Ah, that's where we differ. I didn't.
I had both. I had both, but I had Indian
I
friends.
had I had none up
Right.
until like the age
That
of
changes a lot. That changes a lot
yeah, up
because,
until about the age of like 13, 14. There was virtually none.
right, yeah, yeah, actually same though. Until I was about 11, I didn't really have any, maybe one or two. Um, but still, when I went to secondary school, I definitely did. And you know, everyone had this idea. When I talk to my friends now, we all had this idea we'd be married with 3 kids by 25. Like, what on earth was I
Yeah,
thinking?
I was the same. I was like 23, 3 kids, supermodel wife. I actually
Literally.
wrote that in my yearbook.
Yeah, so you know, it was very different, I think, back then. And you know, one thing that I'm really grateful for is that I have a family who are very understanding. So I just think my nature is very direct, but I wouldn't say I'm brutal, in the sense that I think I wouldn't be like, your ex because you do X. I'm just like, do you realize the impact that it's having by you doing this? So let's just say, for example, if my brother isn't helping, I'll be like, it shouldn't be the fact that we have to ask you for help. It should be within yourself that you understand and you have empathy and compassion for me and mum who are having to do it. Right? It shouldn't be that I'm the parent and you're the child. It should be an adult relationship where you recognize, actually, everybody is working. Why is it that just because of my whole life I've left the sink full, my mum's done it for me, that's okay? Like, let's question as to why we think that's okay. and let me just put this out there. I was a lazy kid. I like would never want to do the chores. I'd be like, I'm not doing it. In fact, I was so petty. I'd be like, if we were emptying the dishwasher, me and my brother have to do equal amount of plates and cups that come out of the dishwasher. I'd be like, you don't want, you don't want, you don't want. I just not want to do it. And as you get older, you're more mature and you understand that like your mom is not your slave. Because when you're younger, I think especially with the Indian families, like this Indian families are amazing because they're so caring. They give you everything. They'll never, be like, oh, I gave you that, so you need to do that. It's just like they're very caring. And so, as a kid, you can sometimes be oblivious to how you're taking advantage of that. And I think especially for boys, whenever a boy picks up anything, it's like, so amazing. I can't believe he picked up his own glass. Or like a boy will cook and it'll be like, wow, he made a cheese sandwich. And you're almost like really? Like, I don't understand like why this is so revolutionary. And you see this with like fathers as well. Like you'll see a mother working like a dog, breastfeeding, like feeding, like changing her child, looking after the child all day. The dad comes home and he's like cradling his child. Everyone's like, oh my God, what an amazing father. And it's like, there just really isn't enough credit given to women. There just isn't, right? And so when women are doing a lot of the household chores, it's just almost like a given and it's expected. What we're not realizing with this generation and the generation before us is women are now working and they're having to do everything else as well. So it's almost about really understanding that and trying to change that. And I guess that was one of the things I really wanted to change was the gender roles within my family. And they have dramatically changed. I mean, like last week, my dad asked my brother to do the dishwasher without asking me first. And I was out all day and I was upstairs and I was like, God, this is like a revolutionary moment for me that I've been out all day. Akshay's playing PS4 and he said, Akshay, can you come and do the dishwasher? Or like, now there's always this element of like, what can I help you with? And I love that. And I think it's also, it works both ways, right? Because I think in every household, people will split the chores. And so it's about also acknowledging like, well, you can help people with too, right?
That's interesting. Okay. So the last bit of what can I help you with works
Mm-hmm.
up until a certain point. Trust me on that. I know from experience. It works up until a certain point,
What do you mean?
and then it becomes like, why don't you take the initiative to just help? And
Exactly. Why don't you?
no, no, no. Right. Okay, okay, okay. Back up a moment. Back up a moment. All right, mum. So in our house, yes, my mum doesn't do a full-time traditional job. So at home, she is chef. She's not cook, she's chef. And
Right.
she rustles up some amazing food, but she does have some roles that she takes on in terms of like she's a governor at the school. She's got some other things going on. Um, so she actually has during the day more free time.
Yes. Okay.
And so she cooks for us, like whether it's breakfast, dinner, lunch, like she cooks. And between the rest of us, we help clean. So on a Saturday, me and my brother, every other Saturday, me and my brother do a light clean of the house. My mum and dad do the deep clean. During the day, we clean up, well, I clean up mostly. We're still working on this bit. I clean up the dishes after lunch, and because my brothers and dad's jobs don't allow them to. I
Right.
still haven't figured out why, because all they do is sit in meetings all day and talk.
Right. Okay.
Um, and then in the evening, we all help clear up. It does get to a point where I feel like sometimes it's never enough because there's always this cycle of, oh, I've got to get back to work. I've got to do this. But I guess it's just part and parcel of finding the balance of everything. And in the podcast I did with my parents, you talked about like roles in a household,
Mm-hmm.
or you kind of alluded to it. When my mum and dad like had me, and there's a whole bunch of other things that went on. You can go and listen to the podcast if you feel like it. But mentally they made a choice of my dad was going to go and work his ass off. My
Right.
mum was going to be the homemaker.
Right.
It was never talked about, but that's the way it went. And there's like, I find it so interesting because I've never seen it the way you see it. And so for me, this is like a revolution. Like this is just bog standard.
Right.
I should be able to do everything in the household that my mother can. Sure, I can't cook as well as her,
Exactly.
but I can do everything almost to par. So it's
Right.
almost like a game for me. So if I can clean the household as well as she can, well, that's a pretty damn good thing. Like I can maintain a family home by myself.
Right.
If I can also, you know, take the car and get it cleaned and, you know, do the engine bits and stuff like that, like my dad can, or I can tinker in the garden, like the gardener can, well, then that's a good thing. I'm domesticated, right? That's just part and parcel of what I want to spend my time on. It's never been because I'm a boy, I do these things. Because I'm a girl, I do these things. And which I find so intriguing because I forget because I'm not in that environment. And it must have been such a damn struggle.
Right. It's more that the expectation is just there. So it still happens all the time. People will say, well, Akshay, it's not like if I say, can Akshay do that? Then Akshay's not a girl. And I'm like,
That
really?
comes out that is that almost like a for your
Not
parents.
from my parents, not from my parents,
Oh,
from my
right.
grandparents. Yeah,
Okay, so
definitely.
from your grandparents, it's an automatic response.
Automatic response. It's an automatic response. Like, but actually, and I'll be like, do you think that that is fair if I'm going to marry somebody and I'm going to have to give up my whole education, all this years I worked for to be a cook and a cleaner? Do you think that's fair? And then they'll be like, oh, no, 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 no. Like, of course not. And I'm like, so why is it that you think your son is so exempt? Right. And I think
Mm.
this is so interesting because I think often we only sympathize with and empathize with situations that we've experienced.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's the time where we all let it sink in and think, wow, I really wish I thought differently. And I guess my podcast was about bringing those conversations before the event happened, right? So I haven't experienced baby loss, but if I do, I know exactly what I could be doing in that time. Or, you know, I haven't experienced loads of friends who have been through it, but if I do now, I know what I can be saying and what I shouldn't be saying and what I should be saying. So I have that empathy before I've gone through that situation myself, right? And I guess that was one of the things I wanted to really explain was that it's very easy for you to criticize a guy I'm going to be with. Very easy because you love me. But when those traits are not things that you're teaching your son or your daughter the opposite way too, then there's a mismatch.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I really wanted to explore, right, with the podcast was, okay, what is it that you're finding frustrating? And are you actually actioning those things? So with me, I find it really annoying if guys aren't domesticated. So I'd make sure when I had a son that I would be instilling those values into him, same as I love my brother. And I wouldn't want another girl to be frustrated with him, how I would be frustrated with somebody, which is why I'm trying to instill these values in him. He finds it very annoying, but I think in the future he'll thank me.
Do you feel like you're playing mum sometimes?
All the time, obviously. I mean, you call me mum on the podcast, so come on.
Yeah, because you were about to go in at me about not cleaning. That's
Okay.
why.
I was joking. I was joking.
Um, you said when I have kids, and
Uh,
I thought that's cool because have you ever is marriage on the table? Like, do you want to get
oh
married?
yeah, for sure.
You
I
want to
think
go?
you know what's interesting. I think people think that I'm like anti-marriage, anti-relationship, anti-children,
It
anti.
comes across as that in a way. It you got to see through the not the facade. You've got to see through the image that people perceive you as. So
Right.
now I get to talk to you. I get to see how your face looks. I get to see like, are you smiling when you say these things? You can't hear that. Like when, you know, obviously if you're listening to it on Spotify, you can't hear that.
Right.
If you watch the podcast, if you watch the Millennial Mind, shameless plug for Shivani, you can see her and you can see like how her face changes, whether she's smiling, the tones of her voice, and you can attribute that to an image. And so, yeah, it does come across as, you know, to an extent, anti-man, highly
Why?
feministic. Why?
I'm interested to know this because I think a lot of the time it's interesting to me when people say this because I think when you think of feminism, why do you think that's anti-man? Or when you think of me, why do
No,
you think that I'm anti-man? What has given you that impression?
because people take the face value. Now,
Okay.
I've seen through the face value because that people stop, right? So let's take Clubhouse for example. When people hear you on Clubhouse, let's say they tune in for whenever the moment the mic gets passed to you, and you start off, and you know you don't give your spiel, but everyone has their little spiel that they give, right? They give the little blurb about themselves and you know whatever, right? Your background and
Yeah.
what you do. when you listen to that straight off the bat, or when I listen to that straight off the bat, the tone of your voice, because you're so straightforward, it can make people feel insecure, right? Because you're
Okay.
straightforward.
Okay.
Because you are holding up a mirror to them, and you are showing them the thing that they dislike, or they think they stand for, but in reality they don't, because it brings up a sense of feeling. I find listening to you interesting because you're so straight to the point that you cut through all the bullshit, and you like having difficult conversations
Right.
that, when if you were sitting in a room together with someone else, potentially conversations that would literally rile you up and get the blood boiling. That's the type of conversations that I feel like you thrive in, because you're trying to help, not push a new narrative or push your narrative, but you're trying to push like the world's needle 1% better, and you're
Right.
trying to make the world a better place. But people don't see the macro. So with regard to feminism, and bringing it back to that, I consider myself a feminist, but I don't believe that, because feminism can mean equality. I believe in equity,
Right.
right? And because you can be equal but still not be equal. Me and you can have the same thing. We can still have a vote, but if you can't vote because you're still in the house and you're still doing the chores or the cleaning, well, that's not equal. We
Right.
need to get you out the house and give you a position, or bring the votes to you so you can vote at your door. Do you see what I mean? So that's the way I consider feminism. And, I consider myself a feminist in that regard. I don't consider and the anti-man thing is because of the harshness of your voice. It comes across as that. I'm not saying you are, I'm saying it
Yeah.
can come across as that. And obviously I've met individuals that I feel are anti-men.
Right.
I actually haven't ever been able to have the conversation with them. But it's purely based on the tones of your voice and the fact that you cut through all the bullshit and you have the hard conversation that people aren't always willing to have.
I think I'm a little bit offended.
Oh God, that wasn't the purpose of that. You do really honestly do a good thing.
No, I'm joking.
Because
I'm joking.
God, Jesus, I'm gonna offend
I
someone on the podcast.
Okay, just to set it straight, I'm definitely not anti-man. I'm not somebody who is like that. I have a lot of male friends, and I understand what you're saying. I think I'm very straightforward. So I won't be like, I just I'll be like, no, it's not. It's unacceptable. Like, I will say that if I don't see a guy helping out, let's say, I'll be like, it's ridiculous. He's acting like a child. It's unacceptable. I won't be like, it's
But how
kind
does
of,
that change anything? Because you do that and people go up on the defensive.
well, I don't think so. I disagree. I think you can do so much of trying to explain to somebody, and they will never understand you because you haven't put them in that place of almost saying it how it is. And I think perhaps on Clubhouse I say it in one element, but I don't do that in a conversation. I would never say to somebody straight away, like, you're a moron, like, you're being an idiot. I would never say that. I would be like, I think it's really inconsiderate of you to not recognize this over like time after time after time. So let's say it was like the first time, I'd be like, did you notice this? The second time, did you notice I did this? That really made me feel really tired. I'm exhausted. That impacted me from this. Then, like, on the 10th time, I'll be like, it's just completely ridiculous. You're being really, really inconsiderate. Then maybe on the 20th time, I'll call them an idiot. But it's a process. And again, I mean, this is like with my close brother, not with like a random person. I don't have, not somebody who goes and rants about everything. But I think I wish I could sometimes have the patience to always be like, this is how you made me feel, and this is what made you understand. But you have to play to what that person also will buy into, right? So
Agreed.
different people buy into different things. My parents, when they want to convince me to do something, guilt trip me because I feel guilty about everything. So they know that. So they'll be like, they will guilt trip me. And with my brother, I have a different relationship with him, so I can be straightforward with him. But yes, if I was coaching somebody, if I'm speaking to somebody else, if I'm speaking to a family friend or a cousin, I won't be as direct, because that's not going to, like you said, they're going to turn defensive. They're not really going to really in that moment be like, oh wow, Shivani, you're so interesting. They're going to be like, get lost, you're so rude, right? And on Clubhouse, I'm really mainly talking about firsthand experiences and how I feel frustrations. And a lot of the topics that we talk about in Clubhouse are in rooms where we are talking about our frustrations. So everybody is almost in that space of like, this is what I want to change. This is what I want to do. This is how I've done it. So that tone is appropriate for that room. For YouTube, I don't think it's, I hope that I'm not in that same tone of like.
No, you're not, which is
Right.
why I find the difference between the two so interesting, because it's not your two separate people.
No.
But I agree with you that, you know, different audiences require different tones. So
Yes.
on the YouTube, there's a different tone to the podcast, right?
Definitely.
Um, to me, actually, you know what? Podcast and me and conversation are virtually the same thing. It's yeah, I find the way you deal with your family super interesting. That's one thing that I really enjoy. I have enjoyed exploring with you.
Yeah.
Because it's definitely opened my eyes to the fact that yeah, this still happens. Like I know it happens. I
Right.
know it occurs. I know it's typical of South Asian families.
Mm-hmm.
Not just it's not just reserved to Indian families. You know, it happens to all of us. But I forget because it doesn't happen to me. And it's important what you're doing. And I feel that you're doing a great thing because you're making sure that women's voices are heard, you know, and you're also setting people right.
But
No.
also men's voices are heard because
Yeah, I was
men,
about to get to that. I was
yeah,
about to get to that. Like you're, and just to go back a moment, it's not setting people right. It's showing them that what happens doesn't mean it's the right way to do things. What has happened isn't the right way to do things. And yes, you have men on your podcast, and you are pushing the needle forward for the millennial and helping people. Helping, I feel like it's almost an older generation. You're helping them understand how the millennial mind works. And I was actually having a conversation with someone yesterday that was like, I don't really hear 20-year-olds to 25-year-olds to 30-year-olds talking about their feelings and their problems. And I was
mm-hmm.
like, you need to listen to this girl.
Oh,
I was
thank
like,
you.
I'm getting her on tomorrow, but you need to go and listen to her podcast.
Oh, thanks so much. I
All right,
appreciate
let's
it.
let's change gears yet again.
Okay.
You mentioned at the start when you were with your auntie that you were getting into this self-development thing. And it's almost weird because like, you know, you call someone an idiot, and how does that, like, how is that you being a better you? Like self-development for me is how can I be the best version of myself?
Right.
Right? But if you're calling someone an idiot
My
and
brother.
then yeah, your brother, I
Not
know it's your
general
brother.
people. Sorry. I just want to clarify that.
But your brother's a human at the end of the day, right? So
Sure.
like as family we take liberties, but
Right.
isn't that like the personal development journey? Can you explore that with me and talk to me about that? Because everyone's journey is different, but I'd like to see why you call your brother, or you know, it's a very severe situation when you call your brother an idiot. It's like when he's not doing the washing up.
Not
Akash,
very.
if you're listening to this, do the washing up. Um, but yeah, tell me about that and
Yeah.
why you went down the path of self-development, because not a lot of people do. Not a lot of people have the self-awareness to.
Well, I want to first touch on what you said is how could you do that if you're saying that you're self-aware? I think this is a mistake that a lot of people make. And it's I talked about this in my podcast with Sid, and it's very damaging to look at it in that way. Because if you're saying, how could you try and change yourself for the better, but not be the perfect person every day, it's not right. You have to acknowledge that there are going to be times where you will slip. So I naturally have a bad temper, right? And I have worked on it a lot. And so I think now I'm in a lot of control of it. There are some things that will really wind me up. And to be honest, in the last year, it's really not, I think lockdown has really kind of brought a different spin to my life where things just don't annoy me that much anymore. Like I'll get annoyed, but like I won't lose my temper over anything that big. But let's say if I did, that doesn't mean that I've ruined my journey of self-development. I have no room to grow anymore. It means I have so much room to grow. And that's how I always look at it, as like a lot of people suffer from depression and bad mental health, right? Just because they have gone to therapy, just because they have started reading, just because they have started to improve themselves, does not mean that if they go back into having those thoughts, that that's a bad thing. It's a natural process. When you are trying to change something about yourself, and let's say I call my brother an idiot, I could sit there then beating myself up for hours and hours and being like, oh my God, then I'm not a good person. What I did in that moment wasn't right. 100%. I'm not going to then beat myself up and say, how could I have gone down this path of self-development when I could do something like this? Because that it's almost limiting in that way. It's not looking at it as a journey. It's looking at it as like a complete switch, and it's unrealistic. It doesn't work like that. In order for you to work on yourself and work on who you are, you need to make steps every single day for the rest of your life. So you need to have a routine in place. So every single day, I will listen to a talk to try and improve myself. That doesn't mean that one day I don't listen to talk that I'm not suddenly on a journey of self-development. It doesn't mean if I don't do something to improve, or I have a setback, or, you know, when I'm working on something, that I relapse into that, whatever it is, that I'm not on that journey. It literally means that I'm working hard at it every day. And some days I will not be able to control it as other days.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my first point to that. The second point of when you say, how did I get into self-development? I really just came up about it. Like I said, I was working at a company and I was unmotivated, I was unfocused. And somebody in a team meeting came up with Covey's Circle of Control and Circle of Influence. Now, I don't know if you've read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, but it's an amazing, amazing book.
I actually have the book right there.
Right. It changed my life. Best book ever. And I was literally like, wow, that's so interesting. I can actually focus on the things that I can control and stop complaining about everything that I want to influence. And so I kind of read up a bit on that. And then at that time, there were a lot of people that were coming into the social media space of like motivational talks and mentors and these life coaches. And I was like, okay, and just kind of fell into my lap. And from that, I just started working so much on myself. And then I had to do this course at Warwick. After I graduated, my company said, you know, we're going to sponsor you to do this course at Warwick. And it was about applied management. And like, that course is the best thing I've ever done in my whole life. If I could meet one person in the whole world, I'd meet my lecturer. He's retired now and the course is non-existent. But he just taught me to think in a completely different way of the way we were thinking now. And I think that's where I started thinking about a lot of other people a bit more in terms of, well, how could I better that? How could I change this? How could I navigate this in a completely different way rather than looking at everything in such a conventional way of, i.e., my mom's always done stuff for me, so why should I have to do it? It's almost like, why don't I look at it in a way of like, why has she done it all this time? Why has she never said anything to me? How great is she for never making me feel bad about it? I want to do that. I want to change. So it was about switching my mindset, which is, I think that was the kind of push for me.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was in a really low place. And I think I was just in a bad relationship. And I just thought, you know, when you're younger, your relationship is everything to you. You don't have a life outside of it.
I've never had a relationship longer than a month, so I don't
Right.
actually know that.
So when I was younger, I used to think like my relationship was everything. And at the time I thought it was that I always felt something was missing. And at the time I thought it was like, oh, I wanted to like travel. I wanted to like, you know, do things, like wanted to go out every weekend. And it wasn't, because then when I finished, when I stopped that relationship, I then traveled and I was like, there's still something calling me. And now I feel like I'm finally in that place of like contentment, I guess, if that's a word. Contentment.
Yeah, contentment. Like, do you ever feel that, for me, with my self-development journey and like trying to be the best version of myself, you know, in a way I feel like the word self-development is a bit corny sometimes, like the way the word it's become like that, but you know, it is what it is.
Yeah.
I feel that when I get comfortable, I get too content with what I've got. And I think maybe I'm using the words interchangeably, like I shouldn't be, but I'm like, I'm doing something wrong here. Because for me, I've always got to be pushing myself. If I'm out of my comfort zone, I'm doing something good. Like
Same.
getting on a podcast every single week and having butterflies just before you press the record button, knowing that the podcast is basically your bread and butter and it's just having a conversation,
Mm-hmm.
pushes me to do more of them, because I know that, you know, I've got to build up that habit. I've got to build up
Right.
that tolerance. And so I find content, like I am content. There are certain
Yeah.
things I want to achieve in my life, that I want to get out of life, whether it's marriage, whether it's children, whether it's some sort of family estate, whether it's a car. There are things I want to achieve, and also there are things that I want to achieve physically and as well as mentally. Like I want to have clarity, like mental clarity. So if I'm out of my comfort zone and I'm pushing towards that, I know I'm in a good place. Like for you, is it as long as you're in your routine, you're in a good place?
No. So what I mean now is, before, I didn't know what my purpose was. I didn't know what my calling was.
Ooh,
I
purpose.
didn't
I like this
know,
conversation.
really understand
What does
what it
purpose
was
mean to you?
to do. You know what? I feel so fulfilled in my life right now. I feel very fulfilled. I feel so excited about what's going to come. And um, I feel that when you're younger, you are so judged on, and you're credible based on your grades.
Agreed.
Right? That's the only thing you have, is how you look and your
Mm-hmm.
grades. And I wasn't a great looking kid when I was younger, and I wasn't good with my grades. So I felt my credibility was like a downward spiral. And I just wasn't somebody who really enjoyed learning when I was younger. And I have switched that mindset now. And I feel like I am thriving in all elements of my life, and not like, oh my God, I'm killing it, but in the sense of like, I'm loving all the different elements of my life that I'm doing, and I'm seeing them in a different way. And when I was younger, I guess I just always thought I was just going to have a standard life. Right. And now I'm like,
That scared me as a child. Like having a standard life scared the shit out of me.
that comforted me. I was like, I can't wait to have that. And now I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I thought that way. Like, what on earth was I thinking? And I just think I'm so excited for the opportunity, and I'm so fulfilled in what I do. So contentment is, I'm content in what I'm doing at the moment, because I'm working on so many different things. I'm very excited for what's to come. But I'm content because I'm always growing. I'm content because
Mm-hmm.
I'm pushing myself every week. I'm content because I'm doing something different. Like every single week, I'm like, actually, like, wow, I've never thought I could do this. I never thought me, Shivani, could ever do this. And I've done it myself. And I'm like, this is happening to me on the regular. And I'm seeing this shift. I'm seeing this change within myself. And I just think back to like 4 years ago, when I would wake up at like 8 o'clock, go to work, come home, watch TV, sleep. On the weekend, get up, watch TV, go out with my friends, do nothing with my life. And I'm just like, whoa, this is a huge change. And I'm seeing that change within myself, which is what makes me feel very content. I'm very fulfilled in what I'm doing.
That's amazing that you've achieved or are achieving, because I think it's never you've achieved. You're always achieving that position.
Yeah.
At not at this age, but at this moment in your life, like you've realized it. And sure, we in society we put down wisdom to age, right? But you can be wise and you can be young. I feel that it's a bit like that with you. You're
Mm-hmm.
quite wise as a human,
Mm-hmm.
based on the experience that you've had, your self-awareness, your journeys that you've gone on, and you are living quite an extraordinary life.
Thank you.
It is pretty cool. It is pretty cool. Um, with regard to what you do on a day-to-day basis for your
Oh.
self-development kind of routine, what does that entail? Because
Oh,
obviously yours is going to be different to mine.
right. Okay. So it's now summer. So in summer, I wake up at 5. In winter, I wake up at 5:30. I've just
Okay.
switched it. I wake up at 5, and then
Are you consistent with that?
yes, I am. On the weekends, I'm not.
Okay.
Weekends I'm not, but I am consistent with that in the week. Like I said, there will be days where I will be awake till 1 o'clock at night, or I'll have a podcast. Like for example, I had a podcast till like 12 o'clock. The next day I wake up at 6. That doesn't mean I'm not consistent. Like if you have one or two or a few mishaps in the year, don't let yourself believe you're not consistent. If it's every other day, or once in a week, then yeah, okay, you need to reevaluate what you define as consistency. But generally, yes, I do. And I think it's important, because I have now got into a phase of, if I wake up late, I feel really lazy. And I don't know if that's a negative thing. I just feel really low. So I have to wake up early now. But I wake up early. The first thing I do is obviously do my bed. and then I come downstairs and
That's an important point. Do your bed. I like that. I like the fact you included that.
yeah, I always do my bed, and then I come downstairs, and the first thing I have to do is drink a coffee. I did try this whole like lemon water, lime with honey, and if I'm not tired, then I do have that. But most of the time, I'm exhausted, so I have to have a coffee. I then do journaling, I do affirmations, and I do visualization. Um,
Okay.
Once I do those things, I do, and within that is a gratitude journal, but the journaling is a very separate thing. It's called a daily Stoic journal by Ryan Holiday.
Okay.
It gives you a quote and you write down what you think in the day and in the evening. So I do that. And then once I do that, I start my work. I was doing in the summer a HIIT workout, but in the winter I didn't do that because the gyms were closed. And I just found it very cold and hard to do it in the winter, if I'm completely honest. So I didn't do that. I've stopped doing that. But when the gym starts to open, I will go straight to the gym, like 5:30, 4:45, be in the gym.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would work out for an hour and then I would come home and I would start my work. So
And
exercise,
is there an evening routine?
well, this is the thing. There is not an evening routine at the moment. And
Do you want there to, do you want there to be an evening routine?
I would love to be consistent with an evening routine, but I just there's no discipline for me in the evening. If I'm enjoying the club, and Clubhouse has been really bad at that, because before Clubhouse, I was kind of going to sleep a little bit early and I was fine. Since Clubhouse has come about and there's like a conversation and you're still talking at like 11:15, you're almost like, oh my God, this is going to ruin my sleep. And then you have crazy dreams and then you wake up and you're just exhausted. So I definitely need to have an evening routine for sure. I need to implement a strict one.
I find the evening harder than the morning. I've always been like, I went to Saturday school, so kind of like the morning thing has always been built into me. So I
Right.
would definitely like, and it's a bad relationship with it, but I am okay with that. If I sleep late, I feel bad. Like I feel guilty to myself. I also
Yes.
wake up with a sleep hangover, but that's past the point. Then
Right.
there's kind of like there's a poor relationship with it, but it's been there for so long that I'm like, you know what, it's okay. Like,
Mhm.
sure, me and you, we have a bad thing with that, but we'll deal with it. You know, we're
Right.
dealing with it. I like to put it as I never get to that point. So I never like to oversleep. So I always make sure that I've got the alarm going. My morning routine looks like I try and get up at 5. Doesn't always happen. There was a period of time where I was consistent with it. It just hasn't been like that recently.
Why?
Why? Just been
Mm.
tired.
All right. Okay.
That's it. Just been tired. I can get up at 5. That's not an issue.
It's just exhausted for the rest of the day.
I've just been going to bed late, later than I should have. So I get up at 5. I actually got this time blocked. 5:15. It's cold shower.
Nice.
Sorry. Get up, make my bed. 5:15 cold shower.
Yeah.
5:30. I like to do yoga in the morning.
Oh, lovely.
So at the moment, it's yoga for an hour or so. 6:30 hot shower. Then it's journaling from 6:45 till it's usually around 7:10. And I have a green tea or a matcha tea or a ashwanga. There's all sorts of teas. I don't know. No, it's whatever's in there these days. Um,
Right.
and then I try and get out for a walk in the morning because I like the fresh morning air. Always liked it. Been a huge fan of that. So I walk down the road. I literally walk down the road, turn around, and walk back up. That's it.
Nice. Okay.
Um,
Yeah, I've been
the
doing
jet.
that in the summer. I
Oh,
mean, in the time when the gyms haven't been open. Yeah. So nice.
I with the journaling, I do something similar. I do a gratitude journal.
Yeah.
I've taken on some of the stuff that you talked about. So I do what do I want to achieve during the day? 5 things I'm grateful for. And then I found a YouTube video and he was like, write down 5 or 4 things you want to remember to like how can you or the things that you want to achieve in your like the mindset and whatever. So I was trying that out. That's been super interesting because it's hard to remember things. So you
Mhm.
constantly bring it back to these 4 things that you want, not 4 things that have been put on you. And so like I try and do that in situations where things are getting out of hand and I'm like, am I about to lose my temper? Is this worth
Right.
fretting over?
Yeah.
And then I do one thing I don't want to hoard, whether that's like I don't want to hoard anger, I don't want to hoard content, I don't want to hoard poor relationships, I don't want to hoard silence. And then I do something that you recommended to me, which is 3 things what went well. But I do that for the day before. And
Amazing.
I should have done that beforehand. But yeah, I
Changes.
like that. It's a nice little like what you can reflect on the day, and you're forced to reflect on it. And then I do something called morning pages, which is basically
Love
a
morning
brain
pages.
dump. It's
Yes.
the mother of all brain dumps. And I'm like literally writing to myself thinking like, dude, the things that go on with your head are stark raving mad. Like you're talking about Spider-Man and then you're transitioning over to like, who should I get on the podcast next?
Mm-hmm.
Or thinking about, how can I grow, how can I change the image of the podcast so it's not a podcast, but then you're suddenly talking about like, I don't know, a Guy Ritchie film that's coming out and you're like, wait, what? My head. And because you can physically see it, I find it so interesting because you
Mm-hmm.
realize how the mind works and like how your mind works. And when you start writing, you realize that you actually have control over it. It doesn't control you because you are
Right.
your mind. And that was like a revolutionary thing for me. Like
You are.
I am it, it is me. I can control it, it doesn't control me.
Yeah.
So for me, that was awesome. My evening routine is one that I am not so consistent with at the moment because of Clubhouse. But you know what? I haven't been on Clubhouse for a week and I haven't missed it. So
Right.
my evening routine, I start my creative work at 6:30. I finish, sorry, 6. I finish by 8, or it should be like this. Um, and during 8 to 9, I shut down the screens. So there are no screen times.
Right.
And I like to do a little bit of meditation, a little bit of stretching, and then I do about 15 minutes worth of breath work. And breath work, if you haven't done it before, is
Amazing.
insane. It's
Yeah.
phenomenal. Um, it's like getting high just off of life.
Yeah.
And because it's all you and it's all natural, and sure, there's a scientific process in place, you realize how important breathing is. And that's one of the things I've really enjoyed about it. It's also because it's so hard on the body, it tires you out. So you do breath work properly, you are going to be tired, and that just puts me to sleep.
For sure.
And so I get to bed by 9 o'clock, and then it's up at 5, and the routine just spins around.
That's
Doesn't
amazing.
always work. Doesn't always work. Like this for the past month or so, consistency has been out the window, but we'll get back into it. And it's about finding those small wins during the day. And that's one of the things, like listening to you and hearing you talk has been nice because it's like someone else out there is like looking at it the same way. Like
Yeah.
she's like, find the small wins during the day. See that thing, that's a win. Remember that, write it down, and you do that during the what went well. And that means that you can look back in a year's time and be like, yeah, you know what? I did do something good that day. I did help myself become better that day.
So I'm actually releasing a journal myself. I've designed my
Are
own,
you?
and it's incorporated all those things in there. So I will let you know when it's out, and hopefully
Oh,
that will
most
help.
definitely. And I don't want
Yeah.
a free copy. I want to buy it, okay? Yeah, because I want to support you. I'm big on this right now. I listen
Thank
to a
you.
podcast, like one that I want like the creative vision for the podcast in terms of setup. And
Right.
it's called I Am Athlete with ex NFL players. And they get guests on. And they were talking about in America, it's like you want to support black businesses. In the
Right.
UK, we were supporting small businesses during lockdown. But when it's for friends, we're always like, oh, can you like give me that for free? Or can you book me in for a discount? Sure. I like to ask for discounts because it's a hard conversation to have. So it builds up the ability to ask for hard things. But that's a separate conversation. But I'm liking right now saying like, I don't want it. I don't want a discount. Let me purchase it for full price. I support you. I want to support what you're doing. And so I find that that's quite important.
Definitely. Well, yeah, I'll let you know the second it's out. But I'm just in the midst of making that. So
Oh,
yeah,
most definitely. I'll subscribe to your email newsletter if
definitely
and
do.
when that comes out.
Definitely do.
You know what? We've touched on a lot, and
We
it's been a
have. We've
great,
spoken
it's
for
been a,
almost 2 hours.
yeah, I know this has been the longest podcast yet. And before we wrap it up, there's something that I'm trying to integrate into the last part of the podcast. And I usually spring it on people. I don't tell them I'm going to do this.
God, okay, yeah, go on. I'm gonna have to sing a song or something.
No, absolutely not. Um,
Okay.
One of the things I like to ask, or the thing I like to ask, is who do you want to see on the podcast? Like, whether it's someone that you know, Actually, you know what? Someone that you think has an story to tell, experiences to share, whether they're ordinary, whether they're not ordinary, but feel that, you know, they should speak about things that they've done and feel comfortable speaking about it. Like, who do you think should be on the podcast? Because I will
Well,
get in touch with them. It's not like I'm not going to, I will.
right. I'm trying to think, if I'm honest, because all the people I'm saying are like people have been on my podcast. Like in my head, I'm like, you should speak to them about this.
That's cool as well.
Yeah, I'm trying to pick somebody who I think, maybe because we've just talked about baby loss today, but Lila was just amazing. You know, she was just so open and vulnerable about talking about things like that. But another one of my favorites was Jonah Batumzi. And he talks about his foundation called the Blinden Project. And I love what he's doing with that. And I think it's bringing so much awareness around interracial relationships and the problems and the difficulties people face with that. And he does that through his platform. So yeah, I would say Jonah.
Okay, perfect. Can you send me his IG handle and I'll get in touch?
Sure.
Amazing. It has been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so very much. And to give a shameless plug, go and subscribe, go and leave a rating and review on the Millennial Mind, because it's an amazing podcast. And I'm not just saying that because she's on the show. I genuinely think that. And so it's been an absolute pleasure, and I'll see you soon. Yeah.
It's been amazing. Thanks so much.
Thank you for
Take
coming
care.
on.
Bye.
Bye.